It's the first day of November here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with a security meeting between Seoul and Washington. The foreign and defense chiefs of South Korea and the United States gathered in Washington, D.C. with a collective voice against North Korea's troop deployment to Russia. The U.S. believes the North Korean soldiers are expected to enter combat in the coming days. North Korea announced this morning it successfully test-fired the new Hwasong-19 intercontinental ballistic missile yesterday, saying the launch set milestones and perpetuating the absolute security of the regime's armed forces. In Spain, at least 158 people are confirmed dead, with many still missing from the worst flooding disaster in decades. Senior foreign and defense officials from Seoul and Washington have met to address concerns about North Korea's troop deployment to Russia. While the U.S. now believes North Korean soldiers are set to join combat in the coming days. Our foreign affairs correspondent Peunji reports.
A total of about 10,000 North Korean soldiers are in Russia, and 8,000 of them appear to be at Ukraine's border. That's according to the U.S. Secretary of State as he made remarks alongside his South Korean counterpart during a press conference following 2+2 talks between foreign and defense chiefs from Seoul and Washington.
We now assess that there are some 10,000 North Korean soldiers in total in Russia. And the most recent information indicates that as many as 8,000 of those North Korean forces have been deployed to the Kursk region. We've not yet seen these troops deploy into combat against Ukrainian forces, but we would expect that to happen in the coming days.
Blinken added that Russia has been training North Korean soldiers in artillery, unmanned aerial vehicles, and basic infantry operations, indicating that they fully intend to use these forces in frontline operations. He also warned that should these troops engage in combat or combat support operations against Ukraine, they would become legitimate military targets. South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol said the two countries agreed to take necessary measures accordingly as circumstances evolve.
We condemned North Korea's dispatch of troops in the strongest language possible and called for an immediate stop to these actions and all other illegal military cooperation.
Cho added that the two sides also reaffirmed the goal of complete denuclearization of North Korea and that they strongly condemned the regime's long-range ballistic missile launch carried out the day before. Thursday's talks come after the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations said North Korean soldiers wearing Russian uniforms and carrying Russian equipment are heading toward Ukraine, and that as many as 4,500 of them are expected to be at Russia's border with Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who has been calling for support from allies and partners, said what the country needs most from South Korea is an air defense system. In an interview with South Korean broadcaster KBS, he said Ukraine will send the request to South Korea, asking for weapon support, once it's fully confirmed that the North Korean troops have come to fight against Ukrainian citizens. Amid rising concerns, during a UN Security Council meeting in New York on Thursday, the deputy U.S. ambassador to the UN directly confronted Russia.
And I have a very respectful question for my Russian colleague. Does Russia still maintain that there are no DPRK troops in Russia? That's my only question and my final point.
But the Russian representative at the meeting refused to comment, and the session was adjourned. Peunji, Arirang News.
North Korea says the missile it test-launched on Thursday was its new Hwasong-19 ICBM and that it was successful. There, its leader Kim Jong-un boasted about his regime's absolute irreversible nuclear dominance. Kim Jong-se reports.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un personally oversaw Thursday's Hwasong-19 ICBM launch, hailing it as a defining success. The regime's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported on Friday. In his statement, Kim said the missile success showcases North Korea's absolute and irreversible position in nuclear capabilities. Pyongyang described the latest missile as the final and ultimate version of its ICBMs, reportedly an upgrade from the Hwasong-18. The South Korean military indicated that Pyongyang may have used a newer type of solid fuel, which experts believe could enable quicker deployment and enhanced mobility. Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo were quick to respond. In a joint statement, South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and Japanese Foreign Minister Iwaya Takeshi condemned the launch, saying it poses a severe threat to regional peace. The three ministers urged North Korea to immediately cease its provocative and destabilizing actions, highlighting the missile test as a violation of multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres also released a statement on Thursday local time, strongly condemning the launch. He urged for de-escalation and renewed dialogue, stressing that diplomacy is the only path to lasting peace and the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Reuters reported that the United Nations Security Council is expected to address the launch following a request by several nations, including South Korea, the US, France, and the UK. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
And now, what is this new Hwasong-19 ICBM that North Korea claims to have test-fired on Thursday? And how much of a threat is this? Let's turn to Professor Min Jung-un for more this morning. Welcome back, Professor Min.
Good morning.
So let's cut to the chase. What about this Hwasong-19 intercontinental ballistic missile? What do we know about this missile so far?
Yes, the South Korean military said Thursday that the missile was fired at a lofted angle at about 7:10 a.m. from Pyongyang area, and it flew about 1,000 kilometers before coming down in the East Sea. Mm-hmm. And the missile was assessed as a new solid fuel ICBM, which North Korea calls Hwasong-19. And the flight time of the ICBM was 86 minutes, and its maximum altitude was over 7,000 kilometers, and both of them are known to be their highest levels ever. And the existing Hwasong-18 is estimated to fly over 15,000 kilometers, which is enough to strike the entire United States. If it is launched at a normal angle, like 30 to 45 degrees, but the range of this missile, Hwasong-19, is increased even further. And it also said that the South Korean military's initial assessment shows that there is a possibility that North Korea test-fired a new type of solid fuel long-range ballistic missile, and that the missile was launched from the 12-axis tail that North Korea recently revealed, which means that North Korea's the technology has been improved. But it said that the further analysis is needed to determine whether the missile is an improved version of the existing Hwasong-18 or a completely new ICBM like the Hwasong-19. Meanwhile, North Korean state media described the ICBM as an ultimate powerful offensive means and the ultimate version of its long-range missile series. It also reported that Chairman Kim expressed satisfaction for the launch. And last but not least, the ICBM launch came just a few days before the U.S. president election. So it is said that the intention of the North Korea's military provocation was to show off its capability to deliver nuclear warhead to the United States and divert attention from recent condemnation of its troop deployment to Russia.
Professor Min, what's also notable is that the leader, Kim Jong-un, made note of the missile launch just hours after the missile launch yesterday. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that the missile launch was a well-planned one?
Yes, I think so. The Chairman Kim claimed that the ICBM launch was an appropriate military activity to signal their will to respond to the enemy. And he said at the ICBM launch site Thursday that the ICBM launch was appropriate. Again, the military activity that signaled their will to respond to the enemies who have recently aggravated the regional situation and threatened the security of the country, and that it was an essential process of upgrading the country's strategic attack force. And he also emphasized that North Korea would never change its line of strengthening its nuclear force. In addition, he emphasized the necessity of ICBM as a strategic deterrent. And meanwhile, the North Korea state media the North Korea said the Minister of the Foreign Defense said that the ICBM launch was carried out under the order of the head of state, Chairman Kim, and renewed the latest record of strategic missile capabilities and demonstrated the modernity and reliability of its strategic deterrence. So it shows that the missile launch was a well-planned test, and it also proves that North Korea will never give up its nuclear and missile capabilities.
Well, it's not just missile launch. Speculations are high that the North may also stage what will be the regime's 7th nuclear test, around the time of the U.S. election, which is already next week. But possibly at Tunnel 3 of the Punggye nuclear site. Experts say, Professor Min, why Tunnel 3? Why not 1 or 2 or 4?
Well, you may remember what happened when South Korea led the three nations, the nuclear talks among South Korea, U.S., and North Korea, probably 5 or 6 years ago. And at the time, North Korea had an event to blow up the Punggye nuclear site when it engaged in the nuclear talks with the United States, like the performers,
right,
about 5 or 6 years ago. Then it was known that Tunnel 3 or Tunnel 4 could be reconstructed or renewed, and the Tunnel 1 or 2 was gone. So the Tunnel 3 or Tunnel 4 could be available if North Korea won a resume nuclear test. And after the Hanoi summit failed to reach an agreement, North Korea tried to restore the Punggye nuclear site for possibly another nuclear test if necessary. So it is likely that Tunnel 3 could be used if North Korea wants to take the 7th nuclear test. But it's not still clear whether North Korea would take another nuclear test like before or after the U.S. president election, because taking a nuclear test, another nuclear test, could significantly affect North Korea's international standing and its relations with major countries like the U.S., Russia, and China.
Well, whether it's a missile launch or a nuclear test, the North, we all know, will make the decisions that work in favor of the regime. Professor Min, do you think a nuclear test is the best call the regime can make at the moment?
Well, I'm not sure if another nuclear test would be the best call for North Korea. It's mainly because, again, another nuclear test will significantly negatively affect North Korea's international standing and, more importantly, its relations with its major countries like the U.S., China, and Russia. Compared to the missile propagations, U.S. will likely be much tougher in coping with North Korea's nuclear test. And U.S. will also strongly pressure China to do more to cope with North Korea's nuclear provocations. And in the face of its strategic competition with the U.S., China one of many its relations with the United States. So there is a possibility that China could be more active to play a greater role in pressuring North Korea in coping with North Korea's nuclear provocations. And Russia could also face an embarrassing situation because it will be criticized for the nuclear test on the basis of its increasing military cooperation with North Korea. So taken together, I think North Korea's another nuclear test will come with a huge opportunity cost. So I think that North Korea would be careful to make a decision to go for another nuclear test.
Alrighty, Professor Min, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
A Czech antitrust watchdog has rejected complaints filed by energy firms Westinghouse from the U.S. and EDF from France over the Czech government's decision to choose South Korea's KHNP as the preferred bidder to build nuclear units. Now, the Czech Office for the Protection of Competition said in its statement on Wednesday The proceedings on the proposals from the U.S. and French companies were mostly terminated, while other parts of their proposals were rejected. It added that Westinghouse's objection to the contracting authorities' use of a security exception was dismissed, as it was filed after the March 2022 deadline, adding that it was submitted in August. However, it also said the decisions are not final and an appeal could be lodged. The antitrust watchdog had ordered a temporary hold on the deal with a South Korean consortium led by Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power after competing bidders filed appeals. Now, with the U.S. presidential election less than a week away, it's too tight to call, as its key battleground states are set to make difference for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Lee Seung-jae reports.
With the U.S. presidential election now just 5 days away, Democratic candidate Kamala Harris and Republican candidate Donald Trump are neck and neck in key battleground states, as well as across the country. While most opinion polls show Harris holding on to a slight lead nationally, the key battleground states that will determine the actual election result are continuing to see a close race, with different polls showing different leaders. In a nationwide poll conducted by The Economist and YouGov on 1,466 registered voters across the U.S. from October 26 to the 29th, Harris received 47% support, while Trump received 46%. When limiting the poll to voters who intend to vote, the vice president received 49%, while the former president received 46%. In a survey conducted by UMass Lowell and YouGov from October 16th to the 23rd on 800 registered voters in Pennsylvania, 48% said they intended to vote for Harris, while 47% said they would vote for Trump. However, a poll conducted by Emerson College on 860 likely voters from the state, Trump leads Harris by 49% to 48%. A Bloomberg News survey on Pennsylvania shows Harris having a slight lead over Trump. With different polls showing different leaders for the state of Pennsylvania, it's too close to call, with the state expected to be the biggest battleground state for the two candidates. Since 1976, the candidates that took Pennsylvania won the presidential election 10 out of 12 times, with George W. Bush's wins in 2000 and 2004 being the only exceptions. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And the result of the presidential race will also decide the future course of global trade, including South Korea, which is heavily dependent on exports. Our Moon Hae-ryun has more.
The two candidates, incumbent Vice President Democrat Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump, propose different tariff policies that have caught the attention of South Korean companies. Harris supports a targeted tariff strategy affecting specific goods and countries, while Trump plans broad tariffs on nearly all imports to replace the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act. These laws directly influence investments from South Korean firms in U.S. facilities. The IRA has been giving tax credits to South Korean electric vehicle battery companies such as LG Energy Solution and SK On. The CHIPS Act gives companies subsidies to build plants in the U.S. Samsung Electronics is due to receive up to $6.4 billion of subsidies to build its foundry in Texas, while SK Hynix is due to receive up to $450 million in subsidies to build its packaging facility in Indiana. If a future Trump administration reduces or removes subsidies, these changes will diminish the strategic appeal of South Korean companies' investments in the U.S. and also hit them financially. Experts say that this, however, is an unlikely scenario.
In order to remove the subsidies, President Trump will have to remove the laws, and that will require approval from Congress. So not only will Trump have to become the president, but the House of Representatives and the Senate both have to be in Republican hands.
Both candidates plan to impose high tariffs on Chinese imports, intensifying U.S.-China trade tensions that affect South Korean companies. Trump proposes a 60% tariff on all Chinese goods with even higher rates on vehicles, while the Biden-Harris administration has targeted tariffs on Chinese EVs, solar cells, and restrictions on U.S. investments in advanced tech in China. South Korean firms like Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, essential to global tech supply chains, rely heavily on exports to both the US and China.
The majority of our semiconductors are used in smartphones and computers, with China responsible for 60 to 70% of exports, so this is likely to take a hit.
Tariffs are also likely to affect consumer prices in the US as manufacturing costs increase and the cost of products with limited domestic alternatives rise. This could have a global impact if interest rates are increased to tackle inflation, as central banks around the world, including the Bank of Korea, look to the Federal Reserve's monetary policies. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Now, let's take a look at the stories from around the world with our Kim Xiang. Good morning, Xiang.
Good morning, Dami.
So, starting in Spain today, where the death toll from severe flooding has increased since your report yesterday, fill us in.
Yes, that's right, Dami. The death toll has risen to at least 158 people after torrential rain early this week caused the worst flooding disaster seen in Spain in decades. Now, search and rescue operations are continuing in eastern Spain with an unconfirmed number of people still missing. That is adding to fears that the death toll will increase, with Spain's defense minister saying we are not optimistic. Spain's Valencia region saw more than a year's worth of rainfall in just 8 hours on Tuesday, which the country's weather agency called extraordinary. Authorities say more rain is expected to hit the region on Friday, while Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez warned people to seek shelter. Now, according to BBC, Valencia residents have called the situation a nightmare, while saying that everybody in the region knows someone who has died. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister visited the Emergency Command Center some 16 kilometers away from Valencia City on Thursday, where he said that the Spanish government will commit all the resources to find the missing people for as long as necessary. Now, the floods are the deadliest seen in Europe since 2021. Moving over to Turkey, where hundreds gathered in one of Istanbul's squares on Thursday to protest against the arrest and removal from office of a district mayor. The mayor of Istanbul's Esenyurt district, Ahmet Ezer, from Turkey's main opposition, Republican People's Party, was arrested on Wednesday for alleged links to a banned Kurdish militant group, the Kurdistan Workers' Party. 64-year-old Ezer, a university professor who was elected in March, saw his home raided by anti-terrorism police early on Wednesday morning on a suspicion of holding membership in the outlawed PKK. Now, his position was replaced by Istanbul's deputy governor on Thursday. The Republican People's Party's leader, Özgür Özel, and other politicians described the move a coup, while Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu called Özer's arrest an attempt to undermine law and democracy. Millions of Indians began celebrating Diwali, the Hindu festival of lights, on Thursday, with fireworks and oil lamps illuminating cities. Diwali, which comes from the Sanskrit word Deepavali, meaning row of lights, is one of India's most widely celebrated holidays of the year, symbolizing the victory of light over darkness, marked by the return of Lord Ram, a major deity in Hinduism. Diwali is also a national holiday across India and is typically celebrated with family and friends, exchanging gifts and saying prayers, while many homes light candles or earthen oil lamps as part of the celebrations.
Southern parts of Korea are having a rainy morning due to the indirect effect of Typhoon Kongray. Rain is forecast to lash southern regions into early tomorrow, and Jeju will see rain into Saturday afternoon. And especially those on Jeju need to prepare for torrential rain with 20 to 60 millimeters an hour of downpours, with a heavy rain advisory issued for the entire island. The rest of the southern regions could see up to 100 millimeters of rain. Showers will bring down the highs below normal in southern regions. The central regions will also notice cooler highs, but under sunny skies. So Seoul gets up to 19 degrees Celsius, Gwangju only topping out at 17 degrees. Torrential rain and strong winds will lash southern provinces into tomorrow, so please stay away from the water. Unlike southern regions, central parts of Korea should stay sunny through the weekend with warmer temperatures. Then there will be rain in the capital on Monday, which will take us into late autumn. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up our morning edition of Arirang News. Thanks for watching.